The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. All right, welcome to the podcast. I got a great one for you today. She's 17 years old. She's a lover of learner, every teacher's dream, and she is the future author of Overlapping of Worlds. I have Olivia Barnes here. Olivia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's unpack that a little bit. 17 years old, lover of learning. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing these days.
So I think just starting with my educational journey and just describing that a little bit. I have always had a very atypical learning experience, but it got very weird, I guess you could say, when I got to high school. So I started out high school in a public high school. It was a performing and visual arts high school. Really enjoyed myself there, made a lot of good friends, had a great experience. One of the things that I realized after being there for 1 year is that it was so rigid that I wasn't really able to pursue the things that I was most interested in. And that bothered me. It bothered me enough so that I left the school. So following freshman year, I went into my sophomore year trying to create my own learning experience. I knew the things I was really passionate and interested in. And so I tried to build a learning journey and sort of model around that. So I took a couple classes at a local university. I took some biology classes there, took other classes at private school, took some classes online. It was very chaotic and it was all over the place, but it was amazing because it gave me, it taught me that I could learn on my own and that I had the ability to sculpt something that challenged me in a way that was very specific to my own capabilities and what I needed. And I really enjoyed that. But being the adventurous person that I am, I wanted to see if I could do something a little more. And my dad always talks about, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. So that first year, structuring my own education, that was very outside of my comfort zone. It was really uncomfortable those first couple of months. But by the end of the year, I had gotten used to it. And I had, developed a routine, developed a rhythm, and it wasn't as uncomfortable. And so trying to push myself out of my comfort zone again, I decided to start self-directing my learning and fully self-directing my learning. So this year, my junior year in high school, I constructed my own learning. And it's interesting talking to people who are really interested, who are really set in the traditional way of thinking around education. Because when I talk to them, they're like, why aren't you taking classes? What are you going to get graded on? But that wasn't what I was going for. I really wanted to see what I could learn and really focus on the emphasis on the learning part. And I really enjoyed it. I'm someone who is I embrace being different. I embrace sort of throwing aside not completely throwing aside the rules, but a little bit, challenging the norm. And this was a way for me to see if, I could really push myself and grow and learn, even if I didn't have a teacher over my shoulder and I didn't have the traditional structure of schools. And I enjoy it a lot. It has definitely been a challenge. But this journey I think for the most part, this taught me that the traditional model of schooling isn't the only way to learn, and it might not even be the best way to learn. And I think that was something that really stood out to me when I first started self-directing my learning, is how much I hadn't learned in school that I probably should have, how much I could learn outside the walls of school. And yeah, so that is a little bit of who I am. Obviously, there's a lot of me.
It's wonderful because, it's number one, disrupt education. Hello, here we are, right? This is awesome. And, pushing those boundaries and trying to find different ways to do things is obviously, a big interest of many, many people. Your path is interesting. So from freshman year being into like the system, and then the second year figuring out, okay, I always tell people it's hard to do this right away because you have to create your own syllabus, right? And then you actually you're your own counselor. You're basically everything that's there, but you're finding it, and I'm sure you're finding people and in different curriculum. From the second year to now, what was the biggest change as going on your own that you kind of grew? Like, was there different courses? Was there a different area of like online learning? What was the biggest change between sophomore year and now in your actual structure?
I think the biggest change, I think it doesn't have anything to do with the traditional school. I think the biggest change for me was actually learning how to be disciplined and learning how to learn. Coming out of school, so my sophomore year, it was a very untraditional learning experience, but I still had the teachers, I still had, the students that I was working with and learning with. Coming out of that, I had no peer pressure and no adult supervision over my learning. And that was extremely hard at first. And figuring out how to keep on track and keep learning was extremely difficult. And I was really discouraged, actually, because I thought, I was an all-A student. I considered myself well-educated, but the fact that I was seriously struggling, disciplining myself enough to keep a curriculum or learn, that first couple of months of self-directing my learning was almost a slap in the face of, wow, there is so much more to learning, to the world of learning than what school has been teaching me. And that is probably the biggest thing that I have learned how to do, figuring out how to learn, but also how to keep a schedule, discipline myself to, wake up at these times and get these things done. I had always done that in school, but in school it was easier because, I knew I had a test in a couple of days, so I had to prepare for that. But while I was self-directing my learning, I didn't necessarily have that. I had to make deadlines and draw in different resources and people to help keep me accountable. So that was probably the biggest thing.
So that's amazing, because actually in my consulting, that's exactly what I teach, but I'm usually teaching 20-year-olds to do this, or 25-year-olds, actually how to actually time box their days and such. Over the last 2 years, what's the biggest memory right now, the biggest learning moment that you've had?
That's a good question. Okay, so I think the beauty of my self-directed learning is that I'm really eager to learn regardless of the situation, and regardless of the atmosphere. So I am a competitive swimmer. I have been swimming since I was 6. I love it. But recently I've been really interested in going all out, and really diving into it, seeing how fast I can become. And I think the biggest thing that I have learned is that, and I don't really know how to phrase this. I know there's a quote around it and I completely forgot it. But the tighter I try, the more I try to force myself to swim fast, the harder it was. And there's an element of trust that, I sort of had to learn. And I've come a long way. I've had some great meets, some not so great meets. But trusting the process, trusting my coaches, and enjoying the journey was some of the biggest things. Because for me, whenever I was swimming and I first started saying, okay, I'm really going to go after it, I'm going to make it to junior nationals or whatever meet I was trying to go to, I was focused on the goal. And as important as the goal was, it was the process that was going to get me there. And so if I got so caught up in the goal that I messed up the process, then I wouldn't be able to get to the goal, right? So I think that was probably the biggest learning experience. Is you set the goal, you figure out a plan to get to the goal, and then you stick to the process and you trust the process. That skill can be applied to so many different areas of life. And I didn't expect to learn it in the pool, but I did, and I'm very grateful for learning about it. And I think it totally changed my mindset around working out and swimming and training and learning and doing everything, because now I can enjoy the process more. I can look at each day and say, okay, I'm not going to go whatever time I want to go today, but I know that if I try hard and if I, work on whatever my coach tells me to work on, I will get there eventually. So that was probably the most enjoyable memory of learning during the last 2 years.
Well, I mean, trusting the journey. Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, that's such a great, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about, athletes and the book and a little
Yeah.
bit later. That's just a little teaser here because, so with all that, how do you assess yourself? I'm asking this question for the hundreds of ed reformers out there. How do you assess yourself if you're not giving yourself grades or all this traditional pieces? How do you know that you've learned something and or are still moving forward in something?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first started, I had no idea. I was very confused. I was like, okay, if I am not taking formal classes, but I'm doing research on my own and I'm trying to educate myself and push myself on my own, how am I going to show people that I'm not just, twiddling my thumbs all day long? But my dad, who is really big into education, as you know, said that to demonstrate that you know something, you can either write about it or you can talk about it. And if you can explain it in writing or in oral communication, then generally speaking, you have a really good foundation and understanding about the topic. So that is what I did. I would write blogs and I would present to different people about what I learned as an attempt to document and communicate that even if I wasn't taking, a grade, or I wasn't taking a class, I didn't have a letter grade, I could still demonstrate the same sort of things that people demonstrate in the classroom in oral and written forms of communication.
That's a risk a lot of people have to take because, obviously that's writing for me was horrifying when I was your age. But as I practiced, right, you just kept doing it. And I was always okay in front of the camera because I was just, an entertainer in my family. Well, let me ask you the disrupt education question. And that is, traditional education obviously is there. There's a huge shift going on right now. I think it's been kind of under the surface until COVID and a lot of these inequities, a lot of these different things were coming out. What is it? What's one or two of the major things right now if you could flick a switch and change education? We have a 17-year-old here, lover of learning. What is it?
Yeah, so that is a big question. And I don't think there's anything that I can really flick a switch on, just because to change education in a way that benefits people and helps people learn and grow to a way that best suits them, it is so much more broad and complex than just a switch. But I think, simplifying it down a little bit, one thing from a 17-year-old, from my point of view, that I really enjoyed while in school was when I was given the freedom to research things that I was interested in. And I was given the opportunities to find different ways and, navigate the world without having a teacher telling me to do it. I had this teacher, she was a professor at the university I took a class at, and she said, part of my class, you guys need to do a volunteer in something that you're interested in related to biology. And I found that so helpful because that was the first time someone really connected what we were learning in class and what each student was individually interested and passionate about to the outside world. And so I did a volunteer program around conservation, helping conserve marshes down in Texas. And, doing that and then being able to connect it to the class was, I think, really helpful for me because I am very much an experiential learner. If I can experience it, I will connect it and I will memorize it much more. I will remember it and I will be able to learn a lot quicker from that. So I think that is a big thing, giving students the opportunity to connect what they're interested in, because everyone has, different interests, whether they know it or not. People have, different interests, and letting those interests come forward in the classroom. So I don't think that is always as prioritized as it maybe should be.
Is the structure of traditional education conducive to that, or is there a change that we need to do? Because where I come from, it's an 8-period day. Some people do a 4-period day. What was it like for you, and how would you change kind of the structure of the school day?
So I had I think it was around an 8-period day. Yeah, that was extremely rigid. You spend a ton of hours in the classroom, and then you go home, and then you'd spend a ton of hours more working on homework. And I did not find that enjoyable at all. So I think, for one, reducing the busy work. And I understand that homework has its purpose. And I understand that sometimes if kids are not busy, they will go on their phones or play video games and things like that. But I think that if students have the opportunity to explore more, so there's this quote my dad always says, that if kids don't have a purpose, they will fall back to entertainment. And if kids can find a purpose, because I feel like people find purpose so late in life. If these students can find their calling and find their purpose when they are in high school or in middle school, then maybe they wouldn't be twiddling their thumbs or playing or going on Instagram, watching YouTube, things like that all day long. Maybe instead they would be pursuing their calling. So I think setting out time in the school to explore and to find things that you're interested in, setting out time that is not rigid school, not rigid classwork, that gives students the opportunity to learn more about the world that's out there, learn more about careers that might interest them or problems that might need to be solved. Self-directed learning gave me that opportunity. I didn't find that opportunity in the classroom. And because of that, I'm so grateful, because now I have a better sense of, what change I want to make in the world, where I want to go to college, what I want to do after college. I think all students should have that opportunity. Not all students do, but I think that is one thing that I would change around the school structure, is just giving students the opportunity to explore.
And that has led you to writing a book.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's transition right into that, because in our last conversation, you were morphing a couple different ideas, very unique. Let's unpack the overlapping of worlds and what. So this all kind of led to this as your next kind of big learning moment journey, if you will. Yeah, tell us a little bit about the book. It's I think you have it planned coming out in winter of 2021. Mm-hmm. Don't want to push this summer fast, because I know. But yeah, let's unpack that. What's the book about, and how did you get to the idea of writing the book?
So starting with the second question, like I said, I'd been a competitive swimmer since age of 6. Always really loved the nature, ocean specifically. Growing up, I always thought I wanted to be a marine biologist, marine conservationist. I thought that the ocean was my calling, like that was where I wanted to go. While I was self-directing my learning, like I said before, I had some opportunity to think and explore, and I started exploring new things, and I sort of came across this intersection. So my dad offered this program. He was like, hey, there's this great program. If you want to write a book, you should really sign up for it. I was like, okay. He said, find 3 things that are not related to each other and find a cool intersection and write about that. And I was like, okay. I didn't want to force it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to think about this for a little bit. I saw some things. I saw a trailer for this documentary that I was really interested in. I saw a LinkedIn post that had some content that I'm actually going to use in my book. But all of a sudden it sort of clicked. Like, what if I could use the intersection, and the 3 things I chose, what if I could use the intersection of mental health, sports, and nature? And I had experiences in all 3 of those areas. And so that was probably the first time I was like, okay, wow, like this is a really interesting intersection that I never would have come to before. I really have experience in this. I really have passions in this. And, being someone who had always been set on being a marine biologist, this was a little bit of a surprise that I wasn't writing a book about, I don't know, whales or something. But I followed it. I am researching right now how nature plays a role in supporting, strengthening, and maintaining strong mental health in elite athletes. And I am loving it. It is fascinating. It is engaging. I've been interviewing people. That is a whole nother learning experience that I am so grateful to be able to experience. But it's an incredible process. It's an incredible process. And something that I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to take, because, part of the self-directed learning is to find different ways to learn. And this is such a great way, apart from selling the book and, getting my name out there, the learning experience of writing a book is incredible. Not to mention the people that I'm interviewing, the research that I'm researching is also incredible.
I just love that. And okay, so I'm older and I grew up with the 85 Bears when they were younger. So Walter Payton is the guy, for me. So, and he used to do these hills in Lake Forest, Illinois, just straight up and, Walter's sweetness, right? He's the guy. So I'm anxious you should write a chapter about that. That's all I'm throwing in there. But so the book, you're challenging yourself. You're throwing out a winter 2021, and this is coming out. I want to give you a chance to give people an idea of if they're interested in this and or if they want to connect with Olivia Barnes. Where do they do that?
Yeah, so I think the best place to connect with me would be on LinkedIn. That's the social media platform that I'm most public on. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to do some Instagram, but that is not going very well yet. But yeah, so this book is geared toward athletes specifically, but basically anyone who's interested in nature, really enjoys being in nature, or thinks that they need help with mental health. I know for me, regardless of if I was an athlete or not, mental health is something that, I think everyone can improve on. It's a process, it's not just you get to great mental health and then you're done. And it's something that I truly believe in, that nature does play a role in helping people's mental health. So if you're any of those people, this is the book for you. But yeah, LinkedIn, that is where I'm most public. So you can probably find me there.
Olivia, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey, your lens on education. I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be reaching out. Everybody's trying to get everybody curious about learning like you are, and just an amazing story. And I can't wait to read this book when it comes out. And thank you so much for hanging out with us on Disrupt Education.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next time.